Welcome to Jump Shots from the Goal Line. I'm your host, Jonathan Dugan. I am joined by my co-host extraordinaire, Mr. John Henningsen. John, it is the week after New Year's. Did you and the fiance do anything in particular, or was it a calm and cool night?
As promised, we did nothing, Dugan. Just like we talked about. Not a damn thing. Ignored the phones, ignored the text. Anybody asked us to show up, we politely declined. We watched some football, so
Nice.
it was good. Probably bigger win for me than for her.
Yeah, for sure.
But as I get older, man, I remember when they made that switch 10 years ago and was like, man, who's going to do that? Like, I'm going out on the 31st, man. Like, I'm not going to watch these games. And now here I am, and I'm like, what a sweet little treat for staying home.
Yeah, dude. I mean, it definitely reflects your age, right? Because I know you're not the going out type, really, especially on New Year's. I mean, let's be honest. Like, going out on New Year's is such it's a dangerous trek that you can take. There's so many crazies out. DUI stops all over the place, which obviously we're both responsible individuals, I like to think. So that's not necessarily an issue. It's just more so something you got to deal with. I don't know, dude. I'm just at the age too where it just doesn't appeal to me. So also, I know your fiance, she's not the real going out type either. I'm sure she was perfectly fine staying at home.
Yeah, she's done at 9:30, man. Like,
Yeah.
there's
Did you even see the ball drop?
I don't think so. I mean, I did wake back up, but like I definitely was like nodding off before that. Like,
Nice.
no doubt about it. So, and I don't really watch any of those
The shows.
Yeah,
No,
like
me neither.
I think if there was one appeal, I think like the Dolly Parton, Miley Cyrus would have been the one that most would have called to my heart. But having said
Yeah.
that, I've never watched it. I know nothing about it. Just looking at the landscape, I'm going like, I don't know. Like, I'm sure it's terrible, but maybe the least terrible?
Yeah, I think I watched it 1 year, and that was last year. And that was simply because my wife had bronchitis at the time, and I had nothing better to do. And what I've come to realize is with those New Year shows, it's a bunch of people I have no idea who they are.
Yeah, that checks out.
Yeah, it seriously is. It's not like big names, you know what I mean? So, yeah, you didn't
Yeah.
miss out on anything. Myself, my buddy Tyler and his girlfriend, they were in Slovakia for 2 weeks. And they came back down, and they're about to move to Hawaii. I know we're both jealous of that.
They are. They're moving to Hawaii.
Yeah, they're gonna go work on a coffee farm. So living the dream. Very jealous of their situation. You know, when you don't have kids and you're not married, I guess that's the type of things you can do. But they came down for one last hurrah before they move. They brought down a bunch of European liquor. They brought down some absinthe, some with wormwood in it.
Okay.
That was an experience. And they brought some Slovakian stuff. One of the things was called Tatro tea, so there's a mountain range in Slovakia called the Tatro Mountains. And as people in Eastern Europe do, right, it's very cold in the mountains. So as you make your way up the mountains, they have this liquor that you're supposed to pour in tea, and it's supposed to, obviously the tea makes you warm, and then so does the liquor. Well, we were just doing a couple shots of that, and it's 140 proof. Good Lord, dude. You put that on the lips, your lips go numb.
Yeah.
I did about, I think,
Hello.
3 shots of absinthe, which was probably too many. And dude, his girl makes just an incredible gin and tonic. So your boy had about 7 of those. I was getting after it a little bit. I have not been that drunk probably in like 5 or 6 years. But we just stayed home. We played some games. Wifey bought a bingo wheel, one of the little cages with the balls in them and stuff. So that was fun.
Oh yeah. All right.
Yeah, so that was fun, especially while you're drinking. And then we just played some games and stuff. It was fun, man. I got pretty litty committee, but you know what? When you're amongst friends, that's probably the best time to do it. So it was a fun New Year's for me. I did not send out any, hey, Happy New Year's text. That's not really my style. I could care less about saying that to anybody. It's just another year. And you know what? I didn't get any myself. So I guess people caught the vibes. So, but it was fun, man. In terms of New Year's, that's my style, buddy. Just staying home and getting after it a little bit.
Yeah, well, I'm glad you got after it a little bit though. That's fun. I mean, at least you had a little fun with it. Nice, and keep like, dude, if you can keep it at home and have some fun, I mean, that's great. Like keep a small crowd, do it that way. I'm with it, but yeah, I don't know. We kind of talked about this even last week about how not into this we are. So uh, rather than age ourselves further, maybe we should push it along down the road.
Yeah, dude. We had a couple invites to go to people's houses, and I was just like, I don't really want to. And luckily, Tyler didn't want to either. And, being a good host that I am, I followed his direction, and we stayed home.
Oh
So it was,
yeah, let the people know. Let it be clear, we're invited. Like
yeah,
that's
I am
that's
cool.
not
All
the
right.
issue. I get invited to lots of stuff, man. It's just I'm just really good at also turning it down. Like
Yeah.
I didn't used to be, man. I didn't used to be.
Yeah.
Used to be
Yeah.
hard pressed to find a no, but it's pretty easy for me to say no these days.
Yeah, for sure, dude. So no, it's cool. But yeah, you mentioned the football side of things, right? So obviously we had the New Year's Six Bowls going on, some good bowl games there. But what I really want to focus on, obviously, is we had the first round of the college football playoff, which I don't know, man. To be honest with you, typically that first round of the playoff is usually kind of not boring, but just
There's
it's
always one
usually
clunker. Yeah.
yeah, it's always one real crap game and a blowout, and then the other one is like kind of close, but there's just not a lot of fireworks, stuff like that. They saved the fireworks for the championship game, but good lord, dude, like this first round of the playoffs was what a treat that was, right? Both games were just down to the wire, huge plays. Let's start out with the first game that happened, the TCU Michigan game. So first of all, I do want to give my condolences to your father-in-law. I know he is a Michigan man, so I'm sure that was probably a tough pill to swallow for him.
Yeah, though he said, because I actually did talk to him, which, some sort of wedding conference call or something. Um, I did talk to him, and he actually just says, the only thing that matters is they beat Ohio State. So he honestly didn't seem like he cared at all. So,
That's what they all
I,
say, huh? All
yeah,
Michigan
like
fans say
so,
that.
yeah, which is like a sociopath, like very weird behavior. Like,
Yeah.
that kind of tells you a lot about where Ohio State lives in the Michigan psyche, unfortunately,
Yes.
and it's a little
Yes.
bit sad. But moving on, dude, yeah, Michigan. I'll just say that we talked about this. I felt pretty good about Michigan and where they stood. Like
Hmm.
my aunt's a Michigan alum. I told her over Christmas, she's like, dude, when we get into bowl games, like this is just it never goes well. Like so she has like a different perspective. Like she
Yeah.
shook, she saw like
A
she
little
saw the
PTSD.
future. Yeah, and she didn't like what she saw. And I honestly was like, I think you're all right. Like I felt good about you against Ohio State. Like I put my money on it. Like I felt good then and I feel good now. Um, Dude, TCU even turned it over a bunch, made it
Yeah.
interesting, like kept them in the game. There were some calls that you could talk about. I do think Michigan did not get the benefit of the whistle. I mean, I'm not saying that they were cheated or anything like that, but they definitely had some close ones that
They got a little
could have
screwed.
definitely. Yeah, it could have turned the game. Certainly, like having a turnover after being down on the one, I kind of think that's a touchdown.
Oh,
Whether
for
that was a
sure.
targeting call, I don't know. It would have been a tough break to kind of like get them back in it with that, but and I don't really love targeting calls, especially when they're kind of bang bang. But
Yep. A la
dude, the
Derwin
game was just
James.
awesome, and like you just can't put it past like those TCU has like some crazy magic in them, dude. Like whatever they have going, it works. It's Duggan, it's Dykes, and a mix of like that defense was actually kind of flying around, even though they still gave up a ton of points.
Yep.
That game was sick. It was a good game.
Yeah, dude. I mean, you and I talked about it extensively on the last episode. We were both pretty heavy on Michigan. I think we both said like don't expect like a blowout, but I thought Michigan would win. Not like I want to say comfortably, but not a blowout. I just want to keep saying that we didn't think it was gonna be a blowout, but I definitely thought they would cover. You know what I mean? And dude,
Yeah,
like you said, this team just seems to have a little bit of team of destiny feel to them. I'm not saying they're going to beat Georgia, but they are a tough as nails team. They can put up some points. Max Duggan was slinging it. You and I were texting back and forth a lot during that game. Even a couple of what do you throw? One interception or two? I want
I
to
want to say he
say,
only threw one, but
and
I
that
could
one
be wrong.
interception wasn't really on him either. I mean, the receiver should have
No,
caught it, and he
yeah,
just didn't, and they picked it off. I don't think there's a player in college football that has cemented their draft status as much as him. Because going into the season, Max Duggan was an afterthought. In fact, he didn't even start the first game. He had never really panned out to anything his whole career at TCU, and I think for sure he's going to get drafted on day 3 this year. Probably like 4th, 5th, 6th round. And he's going to be, I think, a quality backup wherever he goes, just because the dude's definitely a leader, tough as nails, like I said, and has a pretty live arm. Some of those throws he was throwing to Quentin Johnson, like, good Lord, man, just on a dime. Quentin Johnson was incredible. And then, yeah, dude, you said their defense was really good. They're, what is he? Is he an edge or is he a nose tackle? I can't remember, but he was flying around the field making play after play. And I think you and I talked about it when we were texting. It was just a weird game plan by Michigan because all year their whole offense was predicated on run. And I know losing Blake Corum was like, that is a huge loss because he was in the Heisman conversation before he got hurt. But even then, man, like JJ McCarthy he's got, a good scrambling ability to him. They have good backup running backs, and they just didn't really run the ball as much as you thought they would. They were trying to sling it around a little bit. And they played right into TCU's hand because really, and like I told you when we were watching it, TCU struggled really only against teams that were really run heavy, like K-State. That's why Kansas State took them so far to the wire the first game and then beat them the second, was because they just gave the rock to Deuce Vaughn. And Michigan just chose to go the other way with it. I think they just went into the game thinking, hey, we have a lot more talent than TCU. And TCU kind of showed them up. Shout out to Sonny Dykes.
Yeah, I mean, I'm with you, though. That's really what threw me off was kind of the game plan, right? I thought they'd be trying to take the air out of the ball, frankly. Because what you've seen with Duggan is that if you're going to trade punches, like, the dude's tough, he hangs around, and he'll give you a fight. I mean,
yeah,
to the point, he put up 51 points. He did throw 2 interceptions. I looked it up. McCarthy did as well. So both quarterbacks turned it over twice in the air. But, dude, I mean, both teams putting up a ton of points. And so it's hard to really say too much about what Michigan did offensively when they scored 45 points. But it didn't really make a lot of sense in terms of just controlling the flow of the game. Like, it basically turned into a Big 12 game that you would expect to see on a Saturday afternoon. Yeah. And that's the kind of fight TCU wants. That's the kind of fight TCU won all year.
Yep.
Yeah, they looked fast on the field. And again, like they just, and what I'll say about Duggan too is, and I know you mentioned his draft status, is like, I totally view him as like a backup quarterback as well. But then at the same time, and we'll probably talk about some of this later, in terms of the way the NFL is shaped, like, he's a guy who understands the run game and can be a part of the run game as a quarterback. And as that's becoming more and more valuable and more popularized, or whatever the word we want to use here in the NFL, like, I honestly don't know that I would be surprised to see this guy starting games and giving it a run for a season with the franchise and seeing how it goes. Because as you mentioned, he also has a live arm. I mean, he's throwing those kind of like slot fade routes. Like TCU felt like they were taking a chance on that. Like every drive they had, like they're like, we're going to throw one of these, and if it hits, it hits, whatever. But dude, yeah. But I mean, all in all, just an awesome game. The game plan didn't make a lot of sense from Harbaugh, and maybe he already had his mind on Charlotte.
Yeah, maybe that's a weird one right there that we'll jump into in a little bit. But what I was going to say is, you made a really good point. The dude can run an offense, tough as nails. Well, there's a quarterback up in San Francisco that we both are very familiar with, Brock Purdy. Who's to say that Max Duggan can't have a similar career arc as somebody like Brock Purdy, that, you're drafted late, you're not expected to do a whole lot, sit behind a couple guys, and then when you do get your shot, you're at least a reliable plug-and-play guy that can at least run an offense. That's very much what Max Duggan could end up being, a year or two from here, right? Is just a very reliable backup that you can, fill in if your starter gets hurt. So, shout out to him. I honestly think he owes a lot of his draft stock to Sonny Dykes. And, I don't like to keep running over the same point, but I tried to tee up our guest when he was on board with us that, hey, Sonny Dykes was wildly successful at SMU, had a pretty good track record outside of when he was at Cal. Do you think this TCU team can make some noise? And, Josh didn't really think so at the time, and I'm sure he's probably kicking himself a little bit now, as a lot of Big 12 individuals are. But, dude, Sonny Dykes is a hell of a coach. The dude knows offense. He's had good offenses pretty much everywhere he's gone.
Yeah.
And this is just another example of that. I hate to tell you this, TCU, but this has probably been a hell of an audition for whatever SEC team he goes to next, or Big 12 or Big 10 team, because he's going to outgrow that TCU program, I think.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. I hadn't really given that much thought because I think of Sonny Dykes as such a just like a good old boy. Like he really gives off that. I mean, I think that's why he's very likable. He had obviously had a stop here in Tucson, so we're familiar. Already kind of a bit of a love there because he ran that offense when Stoops was here, and that offense certainly saw some success. So, but yeah, I mean, to your point, like he's definitely put himself in a position where he has a spotlight on him, and I'm sure if nothing else, he's going to be able to get a pretty good raise out of TCU at minimum. So good for Sonny, man. I'm stoked, and I think it'll be interesting to see what happens with Duggan, just in terms of the evaluation and kind of what other folks think, because I haven't seen a ton out there at this point, but obviously we're a little ways out before we jump fully and immerse ourselves into draft season.
Yeah, and let's talk about the next game, right? So we had Ohio State going up against Georgia, which ended up being a hell of a game, right? And I think even last week I talked about Ohio State. Out of all the teams that made the playoff, I thought they would give Georgia more of a run for their money than anybody else, and that proved to be pretty on the the nose, right? Ohio State all year, their defense struggled a little bit. Doesn't have the best secondary, which they made Stetson Bennett look terrific. So I'm sure Georgia fans all over the South were ecstatic with that. But man, CJ Stroud played a hell of a game. One of the big things with him going into the game was a lot of people didn't think he could improvise a whole lot, that he was just kind of one of those, 3-5 step drop back quarterbacks, makes his first read, that's who he's going to sling it to. But man, he did a great job at moving around the pocket, making it work, getting the ball to Marvin Harrison Jr., who, by the way, he's not draft eligible this year, but if he can even come close to replicating what he did this year, especially in that game, that dude right there is the next Julio Jones, AJ Green, because he's definitely got his daddy's DNA. He is a hell of a ball player.
He's ridiculous. And Stroud, to your point, was freaking awesome. And I think, we talked about it, and I you pointed it out certainly going into that game that you thought Ohio State would be able to give them a run, and they absolutely did. I mean, Ohio State had that game in their hands.
They should have won.
Like 56 minutes, right? Like there's like the whole game, they were in control, and it felt like they always had the upper hand. And then it just came down to a few plays, and ultimately, I thought it was an awesome job by Fickell to even, and especially there's a lot of pressure that was being put on him, right? Kind of a lot of chatter about, that's one of those jobs, Ohio State, where, a couple little things happen and that job speeds up quickly.
You mean Ryan Day?
Did I say Fickell? Yeah, Ryan Day.
The guy that should have taken the job.
I was like, I don't know why I said that, but I guess I was thinking about him because he's like supposed to be making some hires, whatever. Every time I read something, it just like goes right to the top of my brain. But but anyways, Ryan Day, I thought did a really good job because that clock was already kind of heating up on him. It's like one of those places where you can lose a game and all of a sudden they start to turn on you, and he put them in position, man, and they were in that game every bit of the way, when clearly I still think Georgia had more talent on the field through and through. But man, just like this is why when we start talking about the beginning of the year, and I know like I've said this a billion times, but like this is why when it comes to this, like you end up watching the NFL on Sunday and you're like, it just felt so boring because these two games were so good. And it's not always like that. It doesn't deliver every single time, but what a hell of a college football Saturday.
Insane, dude. And of course it came down to a college kicker, right? Like, Ohio State put themselves in an excellent position to win that game, have one of the biggest shock and awe moments of the weekend. If we would have had an Ohio State TCU final, I don't know what Vegas would have done, but they would have been paying out a hell of a lot of money. But that might have been one of the worst kicks of all time. It
was bad.
We've all seen the videos and the memes of the Madden kicker, just absolutely shanking it, and that's exactly what it looked like. And you got to feel bad for the kicker, but shout out to Ohio State. They they made it a game. And, there was a reason why preseason they were looked upon as a potential championship contender, because they looked every bit of it against one of the best teams we've seen in college football in like the last 2 decades. Because that Georgia defense is incredible. Stetson Bennett is a very capable, and as Georgia fans would say, a very good college quarterback. And he looked every bit of it, Kelly Ringo, who is a Phoenix guy, was getting torched, but he made up for it too. And hey, now we got Georgia TCU, which, who would I be to say that TCU is going to go in there and get smacked around, even though the talent difference is immense. Dude, I can't put myself to say that TCU is going to get blown out, because they took it to Michigan, who was pretty damn good themselves. So I'm excited for Monday.
Yeah, I'm with you. And like, again, like kind of what you mentioned too, I just want to echo it. Like, shout out to CJ Stroud, because I think he definitely made himself a few bucks too, or
Yeah.
certainly upped his evaluation by just showing that he can move the pocket and that sort of thing. He stepped up big time. And then, yeah, man, it's the same conversation we're having where I think, like all of every football sense and logical part of our brain says this is Georgia, just like we thought it would be Michigan. But then you still have that nagging little thing that you're like, if you've watched TCU, and especially, I mean, I watched TCU a few times during the year, but I'm telling you, when I watched them in that Big 12 championship game, just the fight, like, it was ridiculous. Like, you're just like, man, you just can't kill these guys. So I just have an immense respect for them. And so certainly I absolutely believe it'll be Georgia. We've been saying Georgia since, right? Every expert we talked to at the beginning of the season said it was going to be Georgia out of the SEC, and we never disagreed. Ever since we started talking about it, talking with Ben, talking about the playoff, telling you to pick up Georgia. The second we knew they were even close to qualifying pre-SEC championship game, Georgia. But who knows? Who knows? College football.
Max Duggan could end up being just, cementing his name even further down the line if he can beat this Georgia team. Dude, he's going to get drafted a lot higher than we ever could imagine, and I hope I hope he does ball out, man. And as much as SEC truthers will want to tell you that there's plenty of teams in the SEC that have just as good of an offense as TCU. The stats show, man, TCU was one of the best offenses in the country, and their defense is playing out of their mind right now in terms of what we think they can do and what they're doing. So it's going to be a fun one, man. I just know if Georgia pulls it on, Stetson has a huge game, we are going to hear about it on TikTok. So I'm just preparing myself mentally for that.
Yeah, I'm okay with that. I mean, I obviously, because you run the TikTok account, so it doesn't faze me at all. But but I'll say, like, I mean, this is not a big, like, Georgia fans, take your little victory lap if you like. We've been saying Georgia was going to win all year, so whatever that means for you, good for you.
Yep. And then just staying on the football train, obviously we had some pretty good NFL games. We are, we said it for the past couple of weeks. We're definitely in the final stretch where, the playoff teams are separating themselves and the rest of the teams are kind of falling apart. You have like your Cardinals and your Falcons. That was like one of the worst games of all time. And then you have, a few other teams that just look just terrible. But then you do have some teams that are really fighting for that playoff position. We were looking before the show just kind of what those playoff scenarios are for like the 7th seed in both conferences. And they're both pretty juicy, right? So the Steelers went into Baltimore, and, Kenny Smallhands Pickett threw just a terrific ball to Najee, won that game. I just knew that was going to happen because the Ravens went up by double digits, and just seems like every game this year that they go up double digits, they lose. So, but now, the Steelers are firmly in the playoff picture. They have a chance to qualify for that 7th seed along with the Patriots and who was the other one, John? The Dolphins. Yep.
Yeah, Dolphins are still in it. They still have a chance. They need a Patriots loss, but they're hanging around.
Yep, and then the Jags have their own kind of playoff destiny ahead of them, so we'll talk about that a little bit, but I don't want to get too far off before we talk, obviously, about what happened on Monday night, because it's affected just the whole NFL, right? Damar Hamlin from the Bills, unfortunately, is still in intensive care. He went to tackle T. Higgins. What looked like just a routine, play. I don't want to speak on what could have caused this because it's really anybody's guess. It's just, I'm sure only the doctors know. But, Hamlin went down. They had to perform CPR. They had to perform, when they take out the,
Yeah, like
what
an
do you call
AED,
it?
like
Yeah,
a
the AED.
defibrillator.
Thank you.
Yeah.
They had to take the AED out there. His heart stopped on the field. I don't know about you, John. You're a little bit older than me, but I've been watching football a long time. I can't think of any time we've ever had a situation like this. We've had situations where, like your Ryan Shazier's, obviously, terrible situations where they get paralyzed, things like that. But I have never seen somebody's heart stop on a football field. How about yourself?
No, I really haven't, and the only thing like I can even think to, like if you've ever been like I coach like right I coach high school football, and this is not some like I did it for like I did it a little bit whatever. Ultimately, thankfully for the most part, kids were safe, but we did have a scenario where we had to have an ambulance out with the kid, and I can just tell you that it's just like the scariest, most terrifying thing. And right, and as much as you like love the game and all these things, like it's always very humbling and a very, I don't know, just a challenging moment about like what it is that you're doing, right? Like it is always going to be something that makes you kind of think about like what are we exactly doing out here?
Yep.
Because in Hamlin's case, he's not much older than like the high school kid. I mean, certainly it's scary
It's
when it's a kid
24,
kid,
man.
but he's 24, and that's kind of still a kid to me too. And
Yep.
so I can just say that no, like so from like that. I mean, the closest thing I can think of is like when that actually happened in a playoff game that we were in, and how scary that was, and the emotion that the kids were going through, and frankly, that ruined our night. Period. Like our
Sure.
kids, we continued that game. Our kids emotionally were wrecked.
Yep.
Ultimately, the young man's fine, and everything worked out okay. But it's a scary scene when a player leaves like that. And so no, I don't remember anything like this. It's absolutely jarring. It's just scary. It's terrible. Obviously, we're all rooting for him, and I'll just say the thing that's really cool, right, and the thing that I try to take away from it, because there's a lot of like people are always nasty and annoying, and you can always find that
Skip
too.
Bayless. Yeah.
Yeah, and even like just whatever, like anybody who's like mad about whatever. But ultimately, like the toy drive thing, really great moment.
Incredible. Yeah.
Really cool that people like started stepping up, like getting involved in that, throwing in some donations there, and like making something good out of something that like taking that energy and spinning it into a good thing. So just really happy that that happened. And outside of that, I mean, it's just hard to say because as you mentioned, like we just don't know anything. There's really no way to speculate or say it was like football related or wasn't it football
Yeah.
related, or could this have just happened at any time with him, like we've seen with basketball players who had
Len
maybe like
Bias.
Channing Frye, like an enlarged heart, right, and all of a sudden they need to check him out. And so like it
Yep.
could be a million things, and we're not going to know probably for some time. So
Yep.
just a weird way to pause, and obviously really weird to see, grown men that we're watching all the time, in that emotional state. But I can, I kind of, it brought me back to that kind of that moment on that high school football field of like seeing what those kids' emotions are like and trying to help them, navigate that as,
Hmm.
you're personally navigating it too, because obviously you're emotionally attached to these kids as well. But
Yep.
yeah, dude, it's just, it's tough.
Yeah, and you mentioned the toy drive thing. It's just cool to see that, right? Because I think his original goal was like $2,500, and it's up to like $4.5 million that people have raised. So when that young man does wake up, because he will wake up, and I have full faith and confidence he will, at least something out of this just terrible situation, something good came out of it. And not the NFL, but those two teams, I do want to commend, coming together and deciding, hey, we're not playing this game because I don't want to talk for the next 5 minutes about the NFL and their brand and how they were going to give them 5 minutes to warm up, and they didn't decide for an hour to postpone the game. Like it is what it is, and they've taken a lot of hits for that. But the reports coming out that the teams themselves, they never thought once, hey, we're going back out on that field and finishing this game. And shout out to the Bengals, because that's not always easy either. It's not your player, but the NFL truly is a brotherhood, and just seeing both those teams, come together, and even some of the players that stayed behind and visited him in the hospital, like Stephon Diggs. That was really, really cool to see. And I think you're completely right, man. It's one of those things where, I think every Sunday, we go and we watch these guys just absolutely, perform the human version of a train wreck. Every single time they hit each other. The movie Concussion came out, and that highlighted a little bit of what, the actual real damage these guys go through for our entertainment. And, people will be quick to point out the real scummy people. Oh, well, they're getting paid millions of dollars, whatever, right? Dude, these people are still human. And there's a huge human side to this game that just people cannot comprehend until something like this happens, and it is a violent, violent game. It's probably the most violent game that's played on a large scale. And this was just another reminder, hey, these guys are putting their life on the line every single hit that they take, every single hit that they try to make. And, shout out to those guys for doing it every single Sunday, for the sake of our entertainment, for the sake of the game. And you know what, if that young man decides to never put on a football helmet again, no judgment here. And any player that decides that seeing that humbles them, and makes them decide they don't want to strap it on anymore, again, dude, no shame here. We've seen players like Luke Kuechly take 3 concussions their whole career and call it a career because of the fear of the long-term damage, or, people like Andrew Luck, same thing. These players, do it as long as you want, do it as long as you can. And when you do decide to hang them up, hey, you know what? We're just glad that you did it for a little bit, and no shame here. So, prayers, good thoughts, whatever you guys want to give out, to Damar Hamlin and his family. And, I'll definitely be sitting here waiting to see what happens with that young man. Obviously, the big thing on everybody's mind, besides the young man's health, because that's paramount, right? But is, okay, well, what happens now? Because the whole theater of that game was, you had the Bengals, who are just on an absolute tear. They have a shot for the number 1 seed in the AFC. The Bills were currently sitting at the number 1 seed for the AFC. And now everybody's wondering, okay, well, are they going to end up playing this game? Is it going to end in a draw? Are they going to call it a no contest? What are the playoff implications for this game? And I know you and I were texting back and forth a little bit today that one of the rumors going out there is that they could potentially move the playoffs out 1 week, or even, your suggestion, maybe use that bye week that we have for the Pro Bowl. That we don't have to move the Super Bowl and all that stuff, because obviously, there's a lot of pre-planning that goes into that. So they're probably going to be hesitant to move that. But what that could mean, right, is some fireworks leading up into the playoffs if those two teams do play again, which if they don't, again, absolutely no judgment. There's a lot of emotion that's invested into that specific game. But if they do, you could see a new number 1 in the AFC, which impacts everybody else. And then one of the other things, if they do end up moving the playoffs 1 week, that could cause some interesting scenarios for teams like the Ravens that have some hurt players, like the Chargers that have some players that are hurt, or even some of these other fringe teams that, if they can get a little bit more healthy and sneak into the playoffs, that's going to help them too. What are some of your thoughts on that, John?
Yeah, I don't know what the right answer is.
It's tough, dude.
Yeah, and I think it's just one of those. I mean, the only thing that makes any sense to me is to absorb that bye week that happens before the Super Bowl, make use of that, and just kind of push everything back. And I guess everybody gets a week, and you figure out the game that's in question.
Yeah.
And outside of that, I think you just kind of have to say, like, throw your hands up and just kind of. And it sucks for the Bengals and it sucks for the Bills and it may suck for the Chiefs. Like, it may have some implications, obviously, but it's a crazy situation. And so, and now we're already through Wednesday, so it's not like they can figure it out, right? You know what I mean? Like, they can't sneak it in.
No, so they already said they're not playing it this week. So
yeah, so like their hands are tied on that. So I mean, that's the only thing that I can even think of that makes any logical sense. Outside of just saying like, hey, so you kind of wash your hands of it, you call it a tie, or like you said, a no contest, and you kind of just keep things moving, and then like the chips fall where they may, and like who's really going to, like, you know what I mean? I don't really think, I mean, for whatever the NFL got right or wrong the other day, and again, I don't really care about that so much. Like, I think
Yeah.
it's just a weird situation. Also, I mean,
Yeah.
if you want to talk about the NFL as a whole, sure, like that's a different conversation, But
Absolutely.
like for that situation, it's a unique situation, so I think it's like tough. But I just think like there is no right answer for what they have to do moving forward, and I don't think they're going to be willing to move the Super Bowl because, as you mentioned, like the planning that goes into that, like.
Yep.
I mean, are we asking Rihanna to change her schedule now? No, Rihanna
The
doesn't
whole
change her
city of
schedule for the
Glendale,
NFL. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
like all like, are they gonna exactly right? You can't do all that. The hotels, the Airbnbs, the people that have rented their houses out, all these
Hmm.
things. Like you can't do all that. So I think those are their options. Kind of throw their hands up and say it is what it is, or try to work the logistics of moving everything else back because the playoffs is still generally a fluid situation anyway. So if you move that
Yep.
back, it seems quote unquote manageable.
Yeah, and I think your idea of moving it into where the Pro Bowl usually sits, that's probably the best form of action. And I would love to see that. I just want to see what they're going to say. What are the implications for the seeding of the playoffs? Because both those teams, like I said, were playing for some big time kind of prizes, if you want to call it, in terms of seeding. So that's going to impact some stuff. But I don't think we'll have an answer on that until probably Monday after everything shakes out this weekend. Speaking of this weekend, we already mentioned it kind of at the top of the show. There's some big games going on. Just for my team, Ravens play the Bengals. So whatever they do decide is going to impact the seeding when it comes to that. If the Ravens are able to beat the Bengals, which FYI, I don't think they can, just putting it out there. Lamar's not playing. So, there is that. But if they are able to pull it off and then they do play that game and the Bills win, then the Ravens are AFC North champs, which would put them in a different seeding. And then the rest of it really just comes down to those 7 seeds, right? I think everything else is pretty much locked in except
Yeah.
the NFC 1 seed. The NFC 1 seed is kind of an interesting scenario. The Eagles will clinch the 1 seed if they beat the Giants, which the Giants have already clinched the playoffs. I don't know how much they're really playing for at the end of the day. This is kind of the week where you see a lot of starters sitting, but it is still a divisional game, right? And that's a team you potentially could play in the playoffs. So maybe you try to get momentum on your side, and the Giants could pull that off. If the Eagles lose, then the Cowboys can get it, or the 49ers, right? So there's a lot going on. The 49ers would have to beat the Cardinals, which that should be a relatively locked in game for them. Eagles will have to lose to the Giants, and the Cowboys will just have to beat the Commanders, have the Eagles lose, and have the 49ers lose. So Cowboys is probably the least likely to happen, and it probably just comes down to the 49ers and the Eagles, which, the thing I'm paying attention to with that is just what a hell of a job by Kyle Shanahan to have,
Yeah.
obviously your first string quarterback get hurt real early in the season, the guy that everybody wanted to see move forward. Jimmy G comes in, does a pretty good job. He goes down, and now we mentioned Brock Purdy already. He's led this team very, very impressively, and now they're in the running for a 1 seed. The Eagles are pretty beat up. I don't know if Jalen Hurts will play this week. I haven't been paying attention to see if he's practicing or not, but even so, if he's practicing, who's to say he's 100%. So could definitely happen. And like I said, the Giants, even though they don't have a lot they're playing for, it's still a divisional game. So that's definitely something I'll be keeping my eye on.
Yeah, I mean, I think that kind of the lead there is just kind of the two things you lightly touched on is like, boy, have the Niners come on strong,
Yep.
and boy, have the Eagles let this slip away because they were so far ahead. And I don't care
So far
what's
ahead.
going on. And I mean, Gardner, they've had struggles on the offensive line, but these have not. I mean, I'm not saying that they haven't played tough games, but like, if we were led to believe that they're a true 1 seed and kind of the team to be reckoned with in the NFC, it's hard to say that right now. I mean,
Yep.
there's a lot of question marks around that team, and obviously Jalen Hurts fixes a lot of that. And the one thing that might have helped Jalen is he might be more in the MVP conversation again because certainly they've looked rather lost, although they did put up like 34 points in that Cowboys game, so it wasn't
Yeah.
like they completely struggled to score. But last week was bad. They
Yeah.
looked bad last week. I mean, that was a real struggle to get points on the board. So the NFC picture is definitely interesting in terms of that 1 seed. And I'm really surprised just that the Eagles have let this slip away. And if the Niners get a hold of that thing, That defense and a loud crowd and taking the pressure off of Purdy from ever having to essentially play a road game throughout the playoffs potentially is huge. I mean, that really changes the dynamic of what I believe the Niners can do. Because the one question I think you would have about San Francisco is, as good as Purdy's looked, like, can he go into a loud environment and go win a road game? You
Or
know,
if they get a shootout.
and a kid who's like in his what, maybe his fifth starts, sixth start by then. So a lot on the line there, and then dude, we talked about it a little bit. I think at some point during the season, we talked about whether Aaron Rodgers is dead. He's back, and he's going to have a chance to sling his arrow and put himself in the playoffs. And all of a sudden, they have a running game, and their defense is turning people over. And I don't know, they still probably are going to just lose to the Niners like they always do, or whatever. And I think all those beams are out there too. But pretty amazing that they've come all the way back as well.
Yeah, let's talk about that, man, because we kind of joked about it earlier on in the season on one of the episodes where, it's kind of the ghost of Christmas past where Brady and Rodgers weren't playing great at the beginning of the season and both teams were struggling quite a bit. And now we're at the end of the season. The Bucs have clinched the terrible NFC South. But, with that said, they still will probably end the year with a winning record. Brady had an incredible game last week. Mike Evans just turning it up again, having over 200 yards receiving. It's another 1,000-yard receiving yard season for him, the 9th straight one. He's incredible. So Brady's in the playoffs, which is always scary. And then, like you said, man, I mean, Aaron Rodgers, you give that guy just a little bit of hope to make the playoffs, and he's gonna take that team to wherever the hell they need to be. And now all they have to do is beat an upstart Lions team to get into the playoffs, which in most years would not be a tough task. But that Lions team, man, Dan Campbell's got them humming, doesn't he?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that game's like a really fun game because I think
Yes.
no matter what, the Lions are going to compete, right? Because they're fighting for, frankly,
Their
something
playoff
bigger,
hopes.
right? Like, yeah, they're playoff hopes, but they may know ultimately before hand that they could be eliminated, because I think they could be eliminated by some of the events earlier in the day. But either way, I think they're just going to be invested because I think they're playing to turn around that franchise, right? They're playing for something bigger and have been quite for a long time. So I think they're just like a team that's motivated. So I think that game's like a super fun game either way. And
Must
I have to
watch.
think, I don't you just have like nightmares though about like if it's close at the end, like Aaron Rodgers is just going to stick a dagger in the Lions for like
Oh
the
my
millionth
God.
time? Because right, I still, this is where I get worried about Goff rearing his ugly head in like one of these
Yeah.
games, like, because it has been good and like they have been better and they have seemed to put him in an offense where he can feel comfortable, which we saw with the Rams before. But man, I feel like the Packers are gonna end up in the playoffs, man.
Yeah. I mean, the smart money says so. But I will say, Dan Campbell, all the bravado and hard knocks, it didn't end up just being bravado, dude. That dude has motivated that team. Something special. Jared Goff has completely turned around his career, which I was looking today, dude. He has I think he has like 4,500 passing yards this year,
Yeah, he's
which is
slinging it.
just, it's insane, dude. He's been terrific, has a ton of touchdowns. They have a good run game with Jamal Williams and Swift. Their secondary's played really well. So if you're going to beat a Packers team, they do have the tools to do it with a good running game and I guess a reliable quarterback. Who would have said that 2 years ago? So we'll see, man. And, like you said, when it comes to culture building and turning a team around, Dan Campbell's done it. Let's see if he's done enough to get them to believe that they can go and beat kind of the Grim Reaper of that NFC North in Aaron Rodgers. But like you said, man, with playoffs on the line, kind of a legacy game for Rodgers, I don't see A-Rod losing to Detroit. But you know what? Shout out to Detroit still. If you finish 8-9 and you're on the verge of the playoffs, that's a huge, monumental season for them. And if Aaron Rodgers can pull this thing together with absolutely no receiver help this year, what a legacy he's built. As weird of a guy he is, as kind of a guy that's easy to hate. There's no denying the greatness that is Aaron Rodgers. And he's going to get in the playoffs. And like you said, unless he plays the Niners, he's dangerous to any team. Same thing with Brady. The Bucks have not looked good all year. Their offensive line has been putrid. Their defense has been kind of up and down, even though they have so much talent across that defense, and that
So
receiving
much.
core is incredible. I don't want to play Brady in the playoffs. I don't care what team he's on. That guy lives for the playoffs. So the NFC is looking pretty juicy. The rest of the teams that we have in there, I'm trying to think, who do we got? Let's see. We have the Eagles, the Niners, the Cowboys. We mentioned the Cowboys could be dangerous, though. I'm not a big Dak believer.
Me either.
And the rest of their team
Unfortunately.
is kind of shaky. Don't let Cowboys fans tell you too different. And then we got to talk about the Seahawks, right? Even though like they kind of have an outside chance of making the playoffs, if for some reason the Packers do lose to the Lions, and the other caveat here, the Commanders would have to lose against the Cowboys. Somehow the Seahawks get in. I, for one, before the season started, I was on my soapbox saying the Seahawks were going to be one of the worst teams in the league. And Geno Smith has completely proved me wrong. And good on him, dude. I mean, I think he has 29 touchdowns and like 7 picks this year. I think he has 4,000 passing yards. He has had a career renaissance under Pete Carroll. And Pete Carroll is just one of those guys where, again, another guy that's easy to dislike, kind of a cornball, chewing the gum on the sideline. But man, what a hell of a coach. And he's done an incredible job up in Seattle this year.
The NFC is weird because I mean, I don't know. Just like as we're talking through it, you're like that 13-win Eagles team is looking fragile. The Niners, you want to like. I mean, they seem like the most sure thing, but you're also talking about like a kid who again has 4 starts under his belt now or whatever,
Yep.
leading that team. You have the Vikings who are well documented frauds. I mean, like
But also
they
incredible.
could, yeah, but they've won 12 games. So like, I say that in jest because like they're obviously a good team, but at the same time, like it's just weird the way they're winning, and it feels. It's just if the Vikings weren't a cursed franchise, I'd say that I'd feel better about it. Buccaneers and Brady's weird. Like if Rodgers gets in, that's problematic for these other teams, I think. And then you have like again the Cowboys, like they're 12 wins, and we're kind of just like throwing them aside. I mean, they got 2 backs and like a lot of weapons. I mean, that's still a team that I don't think you want to see, but I think I would lean with you where like I don't really trust Dak. Like I kind of need to see it once before I can really believe it, and it feels like we've been waiting for that a long time. And then like suddenly the Giants feel like scary again because they kind of
Brian
have
Daboll, dude.
yeah, they got Dayball going, and like he's like I think we all kind of knew he was going to be a good coach, or like felt good about that. I would say of like all the offseason hires, that was the one that I felt best about.
Yeah.
And they got a good running game going with Daniel Jones and Barkley, and like it's kind of a weird thing too, where they have a very similar to Hurt situation where they're running that quarterback, they're getting into good. I don't know, the NFC is. Good luck. I mean, I honestly have no idea who's coming out of the
No.
NFC. I'll just say that. I 3 weeks ago, I was like, it's these 3 teams and it could be no one else. And now I'm to the point where if you told me any one of the 7, I'm not saying I'd be all in on it, but you could probably talk me into it.
Let's talk about the Giants really quick, right? Because Brian Daboll, I think it's really between him and Kyle Shanahan for Coach of the Year. And I lean towards him probably more so just because going into the season, you looked at that Giants team. They really didn't have receiving options. Danny Dimes has never been good up until this year. Saquon was coming off an injury. That defense hasn't been scary for a while, but then they go and they add Wink Martindale, who's done a fantastic job after leaving Baltimore, adding Kayvon Thibodeau, who just murdered Nick Foles last week and then proceeded to do a snow angel.
The Snow Angels clip is so ridiculous, but
Oh,
yeah.
so ridiculous. They are low key dangerous, man. Danny Dimes, this just is kind of the year of the redemption quarterback. You look at Geno, you look at all these other guys, and Danny Dimes is right up there with him, man. He has completely turned his career around. I think he probably stays in New York after this year on a prove it deal, maybe. But he's a good quarterback, and you're right, dude. That tandem between him and Saquon, being able to run those RPOs and stuff, that's a dangerous team. So the NFC, like you said, dude, is just so freaking weird because the top of the standings, they have their own kind of troubles brewing, and the bottom are just filled with just dynamite that can either blow up in their face or they can just explode on the scene. So it's going to be a fun NFC picture. Moving on to the AFC, that one is a little bit more cut and dry. But like I said, depending on what happens with the Bills-Bengals game, the Bills could still have the number one seed. They are playing with fire there. But the Chiefs, don't blink there. They have been dangerous all year. Henny, you've been first witness to that, being in the AFC West with your favorite team. If the Bills do lose to the Patriots, and they call that a Bengals win, all of a sudden the Chiefs are the number one seed for what seems like the billionth time in the last 5 years. Don't check that math, but whatever. Patrick Mahomes has played out of his mind. He has 5,000 passing yards. He has 1 billion touchdowns, and this is all without Tyreek Hill. It just comes down to him and Travis Kelce having incredible chemistry, having a good enough run game with Pacheco, having almost 800 yards. Those Chiefs are always dangerous, and they're looking just as dangerous this year. The Bills are going to go into the playoffs, obviously, with the emotional toll of the Damar Hamlin situation, but that team is still really good. They don't have Von Miller. He's out with an injury, but that team can explode at any moment. Josh Allen is just a beast. Stephon Diggs is incredible. That the rest of the defense is really good. And then the Bengals, man, we were kind of making fun of them in the beginning of the year, saying, oh, look at typical Bengals. They made all these offseason moves, and they still are finding ways to lose. They're on an absolute heater, and they could still pull out the number one seed if the Chiefs lose. So, I'm not ever going to discount Joe Burrow and that incredible receiving core. And then the rest of it, right? Like I said, the Ravens are kind of limping into the playoffs, but if Lamar gets healthy, they have an incredible defense, a good run game. I'm not a huge believer in them in the playoffs. I don't think a lot of people are. But then the Jaguars could get into the playoffs if they beat the Titans this weekend, which the Titans, I want to say they're probably going to lose because they're on their third string quarterback with Josh Dobbs. And, if you just literally focus on stopping the run game with King Henry, you probably can pull that out a few of the Jags. And they have a good team, dude. They're playing out of their mind. And then that 7th seed, who knows if the Dolphins can get in. I don't think Tua should play with 3 concussions on the year, but the Dolphins seem to want to make him play at any given point this season. The Patriots have Bill Belichick, which is always dangerous. And the Steelers, who we thought were dead as a doornail, they just never have a losing record under Mike Tomlin. And they could be dangerous if, they figure it out. So the AFC is nuts, man. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, selfishly, I'm really hoping the Titans win because the Chargers were dismantled by the Jags earlier in the year, and I frankly
Ravens
do not
too.
want to see them. So I would much rather see the Titans. So a huge Titans guy. I think and I'm not even going to get into the weeds of the 1 through 3 because with the game that we have at hand, it's really hard to sift through what's going to happen. But what I will say is just Chiefs, Bills, Bengals. That still makes the most sense to me. Out of the AFC, I think they're all a leg above everybody else. And
it's powerhouse.
I think you can make the case that the Chargers could be dangerous. I think you can make a case with Lamar back that the Ravens could be dangerous. I think that's kind of where your case is in. I really don't see Jacksonville ready to take that step.
Not
if
yet.
it's the Titans, obviously we know that they have lots of problems. Patriots, I think, have proven all year they have a lot of problems. Those teams are highly flawed. The Dolphins, they've really fallen on flat, and obviously some of that's Tua related. So none of those teams really I see as a threat. I still think, it's been very consistent in that, you don't want to see Mahomes, Allen, and Burrow. Plain and simple. Those 3 quarterbacks kind of stand above the rest. And then I think Herbert and Lamar can be in those conversations, but the reality is, the Chargers haven't been consistent enough throughout the year, and Lamar's health is still a huge question mark over the season, without even considering any other question marks you might have about the Ravens. So I think the AFC is a little bit more clear cut in terms of where your money would lie in those top 3 teams. I wouldn't put my money on the Chargers to escape the AFC. That would be shocking to me, although I was encouraged by the fact that they actually put a team away and just won a game. I mean, granted it was the
Yep.
Rams, but they struggled to do that all year, to just put away a game. And maybe that's the difference between having Joey Bosa and Khalil Mack, being able to pressure, get a lead, and really put a game away. Time will tell. But I don't know. The AFC is interesting. I would say just in the simple fact of like who ultimately still ends up getting in. To your point, like it's amazing that Tomlin just won't ever die. Like he
No.
just refuses to lose games, hangs around. I think the Titans are in a similar situation. So like both of those teams, like would not be surprised to see either of those teams shuffle their way in somehow as the chaos happens on Sunday, because weirder things have happened. And as soon as you think you have it figured out in the NFL, things can be turned on their side. But I guess my main take would just be like those top three teams, I think, are just kind of still a cut above the rest. And unfortunately for me and you, buddy, I think that's bad news.
Yeah, well, let's talk about your Chargers really quick, though, right? Because I've been saying it for the past few weeks now that they have just really started to hit their stride at the end of the year. Herbert's got all his weapons pretty much. That offensive line, even with the injuries, has played better than what we thought they would. And with Herbert, anything is possible. You know, we saw last year the Bengals, nobody counted on the Bengals make it to the Super Bowl. And all it took was, excuse me, geez, was Joe Burrow getting hot at the right time. And you're kind of seeing that with Herbert. Herbert's getting hot at the right time. He's got an incredible receiving core. Eckler's a very good kind of scat back running back that had a couple touchdowns last week. And that defense, like you said, man, with Khalil Mack and Joey Bosa finally back, hey, anything is possible, man. So I for one would not count out your Chargers.
Well, I'm happy to hear it. But you know, I mean, I do like. I mean, look, they had the running game going last week. That's highly encouraging. We haven't seen that a lot. Although, again, you know, it's just hard to say because we haven't seen it. So, you know, one week doesn't really sell me. It'd be really nice to see it again this week if they can just bury a bad Broncos team, run the ball, you know, control the game. I mean, that would be great to see because I think, to your point, I mean, they're going to be able to throw the ball. You saw the catch by Mike Williams. You know, Keenan Allen is now like back to. I mean, the biggest thing with Keenan Allen that people just don't realize is every time it's 3rd and 5, it's just you can just chalk it up as a first down, and it's not necessarily 100% true, but like he wins a lot of those battles, and he gets you those early down 5, 6, 7 yards. He's not, you know, Tyreek Hill, but he is open. And he does help move those chains. And so you have seen the offense really improve from the passing game from that standpoint. And then, like you mentioned, I mean, it's the health of just, you know, if I don't know, Slater's still an if. They're still throwing it out there. Bosa's definitely back, which makes a big difference. Derwin should be healthy coming off the concussion. So, I mean, they are kind of getting healthy at the right time, and some of those things are happening. And a lot of people still disrespect, you know, Eckler, who is just a tough MFer, dude. Like that guy
Had a
just
72-yard run last week.
yeah, and he's faster than you think. He's stronger than you think, and he has 18 rush. And you know, then the guy just gets in the end zone, man. Like he's just a touchdown machine.
Yep.
And Lombardi uses him much like they did with Kamara in with the Saints. So you're seeing him in the passing game quite a bit, and it's just like what he prefers to do with that offense. And I don't love it all the time. I think he's missing that Sean Payton touch, but it's working, and it is getting better, man. So there's some hope. There's some hope in Los Angeles that we get hot, and I'm definitely gonna be pulling for him. But Patrick Mahomes still lives, man.
Yep. And let's talk about the Ravens really quick. Obviously, that's a team I'm very familiar with. The Lamar situation is odd. You know, we talked about it a little bit last week. There were a lot of rumors that he wasn't going to, you know, to get his injury taken care of. He was missing those appointments, and he's obviously not practiced in 5 weeks, but it is an injury that can last anywhere between 4 to 6 weeks. So he's still within schedule. But, you know, as somebody that follows the team as closely as I do, the fact that Harbaugh goes into every press conference and whenever he gets asked about Lamar, he just looks so dejected and so over getting those questions. He was asked today, you know, hey, what'll happen if Tyler Huntley can't play and Lamar can't play? And he's like, you know, I don't even want to talk about that. Let's just focus on the game. And, you know, he is one of those coaches where he doesn't give a whole lot in his press conferences, but his body language said it all. Harbaugh is over this whole situation. And just a lot of the things coming out about Lamar aren't exactly savory. And it's odd, man. Like, I think if some of the rumors are true, we might have seen the last of Lamar Jackson in Baltimore, especially if he doesn't suit up for these playoffs. Because last year he wasn't able to finish the season because of an ankle injury. And then this year, if he's not receiving treatment like he's supposed to, or whatever the rumors are, and he goes into the playoffs and doesn't play, even as talented as he is, can the Ravens justify giving him a fully guaranteed contract? And I know you're going to say yes, because the talent is immense, right? He was an unanimous MVP. He's one of two. But your best ability is availability, and Lamar has proven just 2 years in a row that it's not exactly his best ability. So it's a weird situation, man. And as somebody that is a fan of the club and loves Lamar as well, it's definitely a scenario to watch. If he doesn't play, the Ravens are going to get bounced in the first round with whoever they play, even if they are able to win the North. And that's just as simple as it is, because anybody that watched that Steelers game, Tyler Huntley, he just ain't it, man. He is a game manager. When the game is on the line, we saw what happened. He threw a pick. He's done that quite a few times in his career. So it's a weird situation, and you could definitely see some fireworks this offseason with that team if they decide to move on from Lamar and they ended up franchising him and trading him for a king's ransom, because I still believe that's what would happen. You'd still probably see a situation where they get 3 first-round picks and a player or something like that. But man, what an interesting topic to digest and follow along with, because it's just 2 years in a row that Lamar hasn't been available. So it's weird, man. It's really weird.
Man, Tyler Huntley, what a time it was to believe he could have been a Wildcat at some point, and to see him now. Dude, that's crazy. That'll be a wild offseason storyline if he becomes available. And the reason I just say, I mean, again, I just always think, like, what's your plan if it's not him? And look, man, teams are winning without. Look, I can see it both ways. I genuinely can. I guess I don't know. I think you're definitely taking a risk if you let that guy walk. But I think they've already kind of taken the risk there's no way of saying for sure, right? But when guys decide not to play when they're not paid properly,
yep,
like, it's not as surprising.
No, yeah. I mean, the guy doesn't have a contract. Like, what is his motivation to go out there and suit up if he's not 100% or if he doesn't feel 100%, right? So,
yeah,
you kind of see both sides to the story. You feel bad for the Ravens brass, because they want their guy out there and they're in the playoffs, and they want to, they put together a hell of a defense for that team, and they have a good run game. He understandably doesn't have a whole lot of options in the receiving end, but still, the way that dude plays, like, he's dynamite on every single snap of the ball. So, you see the Ravens' point of view that they want to see their guy out there, but at the same time, we just got done saying this is a very physical game, and we have to remember these guys are humans, and Lamar has to think what's best for his career as well, because he's only like 24 years old or something like that, 25. And he's got a lot of football ahead of him. So if he doesn't feel like he needs to risk it, that could push the team to potentially want to move on. And if you're the Ravens, you just better hope to God that the Texans really want him and they'd be willing to give up the first pick, or maybe Detroit wants to flip him for that Rams pick with Jared Goff or something. Or, there's a lot of scenarios out there. Maybe the Colts, they finally find a quarterback in Lamar and they give up a top 5 pick, and then the Ravens can go out and get, a CJ Stroud or a Bryce Young or something like that and try to hit the reset button. But definitely something to watch in the offseason. It's a very interesting situation. So, and the last thing I want to talk about, we already hit on it a little bit, but just the Dolphins, right? Like, the whole Tua situation, they exited December without getting a win the whole month, right? And I think they've lost 5 in a row. They were 8-3 at one point, looking like darlings of the AFC potentially, and now they're sitting at 8-8, potentially maybe having a losing season if they lose this weekend. And obviously, you can't help what happens with Tua having 3 concussions this year. But the rest of that team is flawed as well. As good of a receiving core they have, and by the way, good Lord, Jalen Waddle and Tyreek Hill are an incredible duo. And then you throw in Mike Gesicki in there. They have a pretty good run game, but that defense is very flawed. The offensive line is very flawed. There's a lot of questions being asked. And I even saw a rumor today that the ownership of the Dolphins could move on already from Mike McDonald if he doesn't get them, or Mike McDaniels. I think that, yeah, Mike McDaniels, if he doesn't get them into the playoffs and they see another huge implosion at the end of the year, that would be shocking, because I, for one, think he's done an incredible job as the coach of that team. But that is an ownership group that, I mean, they went into last offseason colluding with a bunch of different people, including Sean Payton, Tom Brady, a bunch of different people, and they don't care about, stability. They don't care about the rules. So they kind of go by the beat of their own drum. So I wouldn't be shocked to see him get canned after 1 year. And if he does, I just hope he's an option for Baltimore. So I don't know. What are your thoughts on that, man?
Yeah, I was gonna say just just like the Raven, only the Ravens could think about letting it quit, because like you're just like the Ravens are a weirdo franchise, and the fact that they've won Super Bowls but like with no quarterback that really matters.
Trent Dilfer. Yeah.
No quarterback that ever has really mattered in the history of the NFL. Like we know who they are and they won and can't take that away from them, but they're not. The Dolphins are weirdos in like a way that they're actually weirdos, and that is just a franchise that just like flip a coin. The idea that they would already like pass on, I mean, there's no way. Like maybe they will though. That's the thing. Like once you're that weird of a franchise and you're that delusional, you're like that. A report like that comes out and it starts to get a little traction, and you're like, I don't know. Honestly, they might. Like they're insane. Because I think this is purely. I shouldn't say purely. Like I'm sure there's other factors, but mostly to me, this is just like your quarterback's out situation. They don't have a good second answer. Teddy Bridgewater has not been the answer for 7 teams now. I mean,
yeah.
So that's not surprising that this isn't working. And frankly, Teddy Bridgewater has all of the same issues that like kind of Tua had early on. Like, right, he just really didn't have an ability to stay healthy. So he's never
he's
really
got a broken finger.
Yeah, he's never had an extended run. He's never like really been able to stick anywhere. And it might not be fault of his own, just like it might not be the fault of Tua ultimately, but Dolphins, man. Dolphins are going to dolphin, I guess. I like they're a playful animal and a playful franchise, and they're just going to do what they do. That's hilarious.
Low-key the Auburn of the NFL.
Yeah, they are. Like they're just I guess like they're the one true SEC team. And I think that the Bucks have some of that flavor too. Florida's just weird, man. I mean, I think we all know that, right?
Florida man.
Yeah, exactly. Florida man, Duval, like whatever. Yeah. That's why I want nothing to do with the Jet. Like I just don't want to go to Florida. I don't want to deal with it. Keep me away from it. Like I'm not saying you can't vacation there. I'm saying as a NFL team, just you don't want to see your favorite player go anywhere in Florida.
No, definitely not. But yeah, man, NFL will have some good answers by the end of this weekend. Hopefully we have a terrific answer in the Damar Hamlin situation, and we'll get some answers on how that's going to play out just for those two teams as well. But just to finish up the show really quickly, I think we'd be remiss if we didn't mention just a crazy week or two in the NBA. Spider up in Cleveland, he dropped 71, beating Booker's record of 70. It took him overtime, but he got a win out of it as well. Man, he's been incredible in Cleveland. That team is very, very good. They beat the Suns tonight. We're not going to talk about the Suns, though. We promised each other we wouldn't, because that's far too depressing. We don't want to end on a sad note. But man, you and I, we kind of talked a little shit about him when he was in Utah, because it just seemed like he was a chucker. He was kind of like what we talk about Luka, right? Just so ball dominant, but the guy just is a good ball player, right?
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, I think like the beginning of Donovan Mitchell, like no one was talking smack about Donovan Mitchell when he was making playoff runs very early in his career, right? I think the thing that happened was he became disinterested and began to start to look like a very selfish player, and it might have just been a product of his environment. But
I've been Rudy Gobert.
It might have been that, like, right? It might have just been like that situation ultimately ended up not being a good situation, and it reflected on him as well. He looked disinterested on defense. He didn't seem to like love the way they played offense or whatever that was. So I never really was like down on Donovan Mitchell or thought he couldn't be good somewhere else, but I was definitely just down in the Jazz. I was like, I don't want to watch this team anymore, which I think what every NBA fan thought was like, dude, I'm so sick of watching this team because it is just watching like Donovan Mitchell shoot threes or like they just like that was just a weird construction of a team. And
Yep.
congratulations, Minnesota, you now have it.
Yeah, exactly, dude. Yeah. And he wasn't the only one that went off, right? Like you mentioned to me before the show, it was just like, it's like taking it back to the ABA to use your analogy, dude. It's like NBA Jam out there. All of a sudden, we have like 3 or 4 guys just dropping 50 burgers. You know, you have
Yeah, did
LeBron on his
LeBron have
birthday.
50?
I think he had like 48, like
48? But I mean, the guy is
close
50.
enough. Yeah,
I
like
mean,
close
like
enough
this is ridiculous. He scored like his age, which is like ridiculous.
on his birthday, you know, and just that that guy just turns back the clock like nobody else. He's, you know, as much as he's a cornball, as much as he's such a just kind of a weirdo, he is arguably the best basketball player of all time. If you want to have that argument, you know, we're not going to do that tonight because I know you know we both grew up in the '90s and we have different opinions, but he's incredible, right? And then we had a few other people. I think Giannis dropped over 50, right, the other night.
Yeah.
Luka had an insane night that we mentioned last week. It's just been the week of points.
Well, I mentioned, I mean, there's 5 guys averaging over 30. I mean, you got Embiid averaging basically like 34 a night. I mean, he's playing the center position, and not that that never has happened, but I mean, it normally looks very different than how Embiid is doing it.
He's
He kind of like
incredible.
does it in space as opposed to, we watched Shaq. It was just throw it in the post, rotate over that right shoulder and hammer people.
Hmm.
It's just crazy. Like the offense, I don't really know how to, I don't know what to think about it yet, to be honest with you. Like, it just kind of is like happening, and like everybody's kind of putting up these like inflated numbers, and like I don't want to say they're inflated, but it's kind of feeling that way as like it continues. Maybe we'll see in the back half of the season like some sort of, you know, redirection in the other way. Just like in the NFL, it was all passing, and all of a sudden now we're seeing the run game come back into play. I don't know, dude. It has been wild, but the cool thing is, if you're like the casual NBA fan who just likes to flip on a game, like you never know what you're going to see. Sadiq Bey just dropped a three, jumping backwards to bury the Warriors tonight. There's just crazy NBA action going on all the time. So, you don't have to be a league pass, man. Just jump into that NBA TV once in a while, catch those NBA games on TNT and listen to Chuck and Shaq wax poetic, But we're in full NBA swing, so I am loving it, even though, which I think is a McDonald's ad, not an NBA ad. But I am really into it, man. It's just like I'm glad the NBA is good. The Suns are hurting my feelings, but I'm glad like the NBA is like in a fun place where there might be players sitting out a lot, which does suck. But at least you can flip on a game and maybe you catch Spider going for 71, which is just
Yeah.
wild.
Insane, dude. Yeah. So, yeah, man, it was a fun week in sports. Obviously, it will be another fun weekend of sports here coming up. We already mentioned it, right? We have the college football championship on Monday. That'll be a really fun game to watch. You'll have the last week of the NFL with a lot of playoff implications going into it. And then, like you just said, man, tons of NBA basketball going on. There's college basketball going on. The Cats look incredible. They're top 5 team in the country, looking just super, super great. So like we always say, man, sports is a 24/7, 365 type of deal. And, there's a lot to be talked about. We will obviously be back next week. Please subscribe, like, share, comment, whatever you want to do with the show. We just ask that, you interact with us. We are on all the social medias, whether it be Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok. We're on all of them. John, I give you kudos every single week about doing a great job on the Twitter. You've been on your A game, especially with the playoffs
Yeah,
with
so follow
college.
us, guys. So follow us.
Yeah, we're looking a little light. All right, so
So follow us so I don't look like a freaking egg out there tweeting to myself.
yeah, exactly. So shoot us a follow, and like I say every week, please subscribe to this podcast. Please shoot it out to your friends if you got a laugh or two this week, or if you just like some of the points we made. And we'll keep it going because Lord knows sports will. John, do you have any exiting thoughts?
No, man. I think you said it best when we're just hoping for good results. In our lead story there with Hamlin, man, like that's I think what's on everybody's mind. Let's get that first, and then hopefully we can go back to just talking about the good stuff.
Yep. Good thing to end the show on. So with that, guys, we hope you all have a safe weekend. Enjoy the incredible sports, and we'll talk to you next week. Bye.